What do you do as a senator in ancient Rome when the emperor is taking away all your power? Exactly, you summon demons to regain this power. Surprisingly, in the background story of Ludus Mortis, this didn't work out too well. The number of demons eventually got out of hand and they started dominating humanity instead. In this world, we are now running some kind of gladiator school, train fighters and send them to their death. Of course, we sent them to the dungeons to kill the nasty demons. I have taken a look at the preview demo released during the Steam Next Fest and checked out the developer livestream, and in this video I will share my observations and opinion with you. Our journey starts in the main menu. Unfortunately, we don't have an option menu here already, which could be used to lower the volume, for example. Instead, we got a toggle full screen button to get rid of the ugly window frame. Unfortunately, neither this nor the volume, which we can adjust later on, is being saved. Surely something which can be fixed till release. We start a new game and first select our save slot. Ludus Mortis is basically an Iron Man game that saves automatically and can be compared to Darkest Dungeon in that regard, meaning that it is kind of a roguelite where we can suffer setbacks every now and then, but overall it will always go forward. For example, you can keep expanding your headquarters. When it comes to the difficulty level, we can also activate the hardcore mode. If this is not activated, then characters can never really die. But if it is, then dead characters are truly dead. However, the character will only die if you don't choose to use a limited resource to resurrect him at the end of the mission. From the demo alone, I can't quite judge how much of this resource you will get later on, but generally I like the idea. After a short intro of images, text and music, we find ourselves in our HQ, where we first create some new characters. The attributes are unfortunately rolled randomly via dice, a game mechanic that in my opinion is outdated and leads to just re-rolling hundreds of times until you achieve the best possible results. In the help menu, the game even somewhat warns you that increasing them afterwards with your experience points might be extremely costly and is possibly not the best idea. After that, we select one of the 14 classes. Each class has different maximum levels on abilities like one-handed combat and different spell schools. It will unlock special combat abilities on later level ups, and some classes will also get certain abilities for exploration, like fixing locks of broken chests. We can then assign the characters we created to our active party, but before we enter the dungeon, we should first buy some decent equipment for our newcomers and visit the merchant. You have to be a little careful here to not start spending all your money on armor first, as this might leave you empty-handed. Like really, you might not have any money left to buy weapons. You can find weapons as well as armor within the dungeon, but starting your adventure with just fist fights will probably put your party on the fast track to its demise, so make sure you buy weapons first. There are a bunch of other buildings in the HQ, for example to send your characters for training, and in the finished game you should be able to upgrade and expand these buildings. One will unlock after the first dungeon, the rest will stay locked in this demo though, and so it's time to go into the dungeon. We will select the dungeon on a map, on which we can also purchase additional equipment like lockpicks, and we can hire a temporary companion, which will give us some bonuses. When it comes to graphics and controls within the dungeon, I'm afraid that they got worse by the developers' attempt to make the dungeon looking more modern by going 3D this time. While the textures of the walls in the developers' last 2D game called Inferno are quite nice to look at, the textures in this 3D environment look quite generic. And while the 2D game Inferno had instant steps, Ludus Mortis now got transitions when you move from tile to tile. But as commands are not queued up, navigation doesn't feel great, as you essentially need to wait each time before you can turn around. It's also not helping that there's some very noticeable stuttering every now and then. We start exploring the dungeon, and it doesn't take long before we get attacked by our demonly foes. Most of them will just appear out of nowhere, but you can adjust the frequency with which they are going to show up. In addition to these surprise attacks, there are a few static opponents on the map, but they only appear as some weird sphere first before you engage them. Once we engage in battle, we can see the nicely drawn demons and we get a new interface. At the top we can see the turn order, and at the bottom all our abilities and attack options will show up. At the beginning of the game there aren't too many options, but later on you will be able to choose 4 active abilities from the pool of skills each character got. You can now decide which enemy you want to target and then use your action points to perform the attack or spell. Generally, I do like action point based systems, but at least at the beginning of the game you can usually only attack once or twice, and then you got to click on end turn, and that additional action drags the duration of the battle quite a bit, especially as missing with your attack is also not uncommon. Due to that, I recommend to also use your space key to end the turns and speed up the combat. Once all the enemies are toast, we continue to explore the dungeon, which is also neatly tracked on the automap. In addition to enemies, there's quite a bit to find in the dungeons. There are small puzzles, crates, secret passages and traps, and with special abilities we can repair locks and identify traps. And there you should know that you can also click on the portraits to access these abilities. If you open the inventory screen instead, you will always need to go through loading screens. Switching back to the dungeon view takes up to whopping 5 seconds. That may not sound like much, but it takes away some of the fun of finding new items. The dungeon we are seeing here is static, and on the Steam page you can read that there will be dozens of dungeons in the game. I asked the developer whether these will also be static or randomly generated, and the latter is the case.
It's not randomly generated. I don't know if I will add the option to have some randomly generated dungeon in the future, but right now I will create every dungeon.
You can also repeat dungeons if you want to, which probably will also be necessary. The map will then be shown right away and you will be able to get new items out of it, however you won't get the full reward again. Of course, the question will be how fun it will be to do the same dungeon over and over and how efficient that will be in comparison to explore and to do other dungeons. There's also an overarching story with multiple cutscenes and an ending though, and I would assume that in order to see that, you won't be able to just stick to the first level. How tactical the battles and how interesting upgrading your base is going to be is hard to tell from the demo. Ludus Mortis has an interesting scenario, but still needs quite a bit of polish in my opinion. The switch from the 2D engine to 3D seems to have rather hurt than helped the game unfortunately, both visually and gameplay wise. Of course, this all can still be improved before release, however that release was last planned for the second quarter of this year already, so time could be running out. But that's all from my side regarding Ludus Mortis. I thank you for watching, and if you think that this first look was helpful, then liking and subscribing is appreciated. I will go slaughter a few more demons. I wish you happy crawling, and I hope to see you again next time.